And this is just a very simple suggestion. If they could ditch the racism, all they needed to do is just tell Africans that they're going to give them free visas provided they come and they reproduce and they produce at least 3 children each. Kid you the shit not, there's some guy that will take themselves there. Actually, a bunch of guys will take themselves there. A couple of women will take themselves there because there's some women that like white guys. And people will just reproduce and...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who might find it hard to breathe if you've got that asthma. He is also a man who may have included skipping leg day to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I am here to talk about dating because there's a government that wants to promote it, or at least the end benefits of it, and there is a group of women, or at least some women, that want to kind of dissuade men from doing it. And you know, they usually talk about that shit and they call that shit standards. What am I talking about? I will get to that in a bit, but before I can say anything regarding that, first of all, thank you so much for listening. I hope you listen all the way till the end. And should you like what it is that you're listening to, should you not like it, should you want to give feedback, or if you want to suggest a topic that we should discuss, then the DMs are usually open and the social media is always in the description. But if you do not know, or if you do not feel like you want to look at the description, or if you don't care to read it, then on IG it is at the Breakdown_podcast. On Facebook it is at the Breakdown Podcast. On X it is at Bagakadadi. And on Bluesky it is at the breakdownpod.bsky.social. And you know, like I said, the DMs are always open and you can reach out to me and I will handle your DMs accordingly. And you know, if you can also follow, I'd appreciate that shit, because you know, more followers is nice, and you know, I like having many followers because like credibility, and like, you know, like people like being on famous shit, doing famous shit, even though they themselves may or may not be famous. But all in all, thank you so much for listening. Like I said, I hope you listen all the way till the end. And with all of that said, I should probably be getting to the topics of today, of which I want us to start off by not necessarily dealing with something that is centered on Kenya, but to go to the wonderful land of Europe, to a country that is not mentioned all that much, not unless you're talking about football or the feeling of starvation, and that is the country of Hungary. Hungary. Yeah, so Hungary recently introduced some very historical tax laws whereby, you know, people are gonna get tax benefits because the country actually wants people. Now, Hungary recently introduced a historical set of tax laws whereby they said that there will be no income tax for mothers who have one child up until they're 30 years old, and if you get 2 or more children, you know, you will have no income tax for life. And you know, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? If they told them to just get 10 kids, I'm sure they'd have probably pulled that off. You know, just for the tax benefits, I'm sure there's a female billionaire that would go there, seek citizenship or residency, and make sure that she gets piped by niggas like every single year up until she gets like her tax-free status as like a mom and shit with like a bunch of kids. But you know, then again, maybe I might be jumping the gun a little bit too much, but let me just read the quick caption that came with this story. So it says, and I quote, Hungary has rolled out historic tax reforms to support mothers and reverse population decline. Mothers with one child will now enjoy no income tax until the age of 30, while those with 2 or more children are exempt for life. Building on a 2019 policy for mothers of 4, the expanded measures effective from October 2025 for 3-child mothers and January 2026 for 2 aim to benefit nearly 1 million families. Prime Minister Viktor Orban hailed it as a cornerstone of a quote-unquote family-centered economy, positioning Hungary as a pioneer in Europe's demographic policy landscape. End quote. And, okay, now we can clearly see why it is that they're bringing some of these tax reforms. Like, they've clearly noticed that they are having a population of young people, or just people in general, that are trying to not have as many kids as they need in the country. And granted, I feel like this is something that is being noticed in a lot of countries around the world. The most prominent examples are South Korea, who I think it was last year where they had no first grade kids to teach, if I'm not wrong. Japan has also been noticing that, and they've been sort of carrying out some of their own measures and trying to hook people up. I think China at some point was also trying to get people to hook up in the office or some shit. Like, they've basically been trying to like get the population to like restart and like have more kids than they're currently having right now, because the rate at which people are having kids in some of those countries and even globally is actually a lot lower than it actually should be, and it is actually a problem for a lot of these governments. Now, there's places like, of course, like I said, South Korea and Japan that are much heavier affected by it. But when you look at some European countries, I know Denmark, if I'm not wrong, tried to introduce some policies to try and, have people reproduce a little bit more. Hungary is the next country that I'm hearing about. And it's just that these guys don't want to come out and say that, guys, we are having a population problem and we need you guys to repopulate. Like, we need you guys to fuck and not pull out and not use any condoms and have a bunch of kids. To which a shit ton of millennials and a couple of Gen Zs are just not feeling that vibe, and they're like, you know what, I just don't want to have kids. And they feel like they should be okay with that. And it's particularly interesting. Like, the safest continent in the world in terms of like this whole population crisis, in my opinion, is Africa, because we just have way more young people. And people out here are not afraid to have kids. So maybe, just maybe, if these guys really wanted to improve the population of Hungary, if the Hungarian government really wanted to improve it, and this is just a very simple suggestion, if they could ditch the racism, all they needed to do is just tell Africans that they're going to give them free visas provided they come and they reproduce and they produce at least 3 children each. Kid you the shit not, there's some guy that will take themselves there. Actually, a bunch of guys will take themselves there. A couple of women will take themselves there because there's some women that like white guys. And people will just reproduce, and the population decline will be reversed in like, what, at least like 5 years, and in some cases like 10, 15 years, like they'll have the population back up. Because like the one thing that I know about us as Africans, we fuck around a lot, or at least we like to fuck, and we don't mind having kids. Hell, a large chunk of us look at children as a blessing. So the thought that, these guys are having trouble having kids, like, us guys will basically just ship ourselves there. Like, we don't mind it, and provided you give us good opportunities to make good money, and you just allow us to live there peacefully and nicely, kid you the hell not, all you need to do is import a couple of Africans and we will sort out your population issues for you stat. Because guess what, this would probably be like the best job ever for us guys, because all we have to do is hit it and not pull out at any given point in time. Although, then again, maybe I don't entirely understand this, and maybe I kind of have it all wrong. Either way, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, not too long ago, I was on Reddit and I stumbled onto a particularly interesting post. Now, normally there's a lot of relationship talk whenever I go to a bunch of the different forums where I'm at on Reddit, and sometimes I find them funny, sometimes I find them as good content, but other times I just look at them and I'm like, why are we still dealing with this shit? And I found a post which, I'll be very honest, was an example of why are we still dealing with this shit. And it was titled Dating Being a Financial Audit. And I will read the post, then I can give my thoughts on it, because it involves something that I feel like we've talked about for such a long time that at this point in time and at this rate, we probably shouldn't be having it anymore, because we already know what everyone's current situation is, or at least most people. So why toss your problems onto someone else? But anyways, let me not jump the gun. Let me just read the post real quick. So it says, and I quote, "So I met this girl and borrowed her number. Nothing serious, just a vibe, We'd been chatting a bit and I figured she was cool. About a week later, she calls me up. At first, it's all good, jokes, humor, laughter, the usual stuff. I'm enjoying it, thinking maybe this could lead somewhere. Then out of nowhere, she switches gears and starts talking about us going out. Cool, I'm down for that. But then she hits me with this. Make sure you carry enough money for food, snapping photos, payment kando, snacks, payment kando, massage, and all of that. I'm like, excuse me, what is this, a shopping list? I'm sitting there, phone to my ear, trying to process what I just heard. Food, I get, fair enough. But photos payment, snacks payment, massage, what's next? A tip for breathing near her? I half expected her to say, oh, and bring extra for my Uber home. She's going on like it's no big deal, laying out this whole plan where I'm supposed to fund her every move. And I'm just thinking, yuck, When did I sign up to be her professional sponsor? I borrowed her number, not a contract to fulfill her fantasies. So I cut in and say, look, I'm not here to bankroll your dreams. If we're going out, let's figure it out together. What can I afford? Not you deciding how I spend my money for your own benefit. And you know what? It's not even just her. I hate every conversation I have nowadays with these girls. It just plays around with the money thing. It's always about money, like I'm some walking wallet. I'm not here to play ATM for anyone. If I'm spending, it's my call, not hers. Let me decide what I can do for a girl, not the other way around where she's dictating my budget. So yeah, that's my story. Ever dealt with this kind of thing? How did you handle it when someone turns a date into a financial audit? I'm all ears for your thoughts. End quote. Now, first of all, I would probably start by just trying to correct his grammar a little bit. You don't borrow a number, you ask for it. And this is one of those mistakes that, like, I notice people have made ever since they were kids. And you would start with, like, shit like snacks. And like, oh, I was borrowing fries from him or some shit. Like, if you're borrowing some shit, you're returning it. If you're just taking it, just ask. But then again, that's just me nitpicking, and this isn't a grammar podcast or anything of that sort. I'm not discussing English literature. But with that said, I feel like for a lot of guys that end up in situations like this, like, I'm not saying that this is entirely accurate. So, don't take my word for it. But I feel like a lot of times people attract the kind of people that they want based on how they carry themselves. So you find that there's a lot of women that may expect some sort of monetary benefit from a date or will expect to be fully funded for that date. And the question is, how do you carry yourself such that you end up pulling that example of a babe? Because personally, I think I've only ever pulled such maybe once or twice in my life. Most of the time, I'm dealing with women who are okay covering their own bill. Some of them even end up covering the entire thing. It is quite questionable in, the kind of people that you seem to be attracting and talking to. But, then again, like I said, it's not entirely accurate information, but at the same time, it's neither here nor there. So I'm very willing to sort of push that aside and not think about it too much. Now, personally speaking, I feel like as a conversation, as a subtopic, or as a topic when it comes to dating and relationships, I feel like the whole talk of like the babe that expects you to spend a bunch of money on her is something that's been covered so much that it's almost like a tired out topic. Like, I feel like that's the case. Granted, I'm a guy that talks about relationships twice a week, and I've been doing this for about, give or take, close to 6 years, minus a hiatus or two here and there. Like, it feels like such topics are so used up, and by now I feel like you should already know what to do in this case. Because, like, when you're getting to a point where you're dealing with a babe that's asking for all that, like, you already know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, I will tell you what to do. It's a simple case of, are you ready and willing to take that up? Yes or no? If you are ready to do it, then just take it up. Don't complain too much about it, because clearly it's something that you are open to doing and you're okay with. So, no biggie. Now, if you're not okay doing that, let's say, for example, either you have the means, but you're not feeling very comfortable with such a person, or you don't have the means, so, it's not even about whether you're comfortable with such a person, then you simply just turn them down. You basically can just choose to throw them into the friend zone, or you basically just say, hey, look, I'm not really feeling this. I don't think I want a relationship with you that's built on like me having to spend money just to get your attention or just to be with you. Like, I'm not really feeling it like that, and you seem like you want a guy that just spends money on you. And it may not be that I don't have it, but I'm just not about that kind of life. So, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. And hell, you don't even need to be as wordy as I'm saying it right now. Like, you just come up with your own way of saying, hey, look, I'm not feeling it, and this is probably why, or I'm just not feeling it. Thank you and have a great day. And you can kind of just move from that, and essentially that should save you from a lot of these issues. And yes, I get it, dude did actually do more or less the same thing that I'm saying, and his problem is that he's been encountering a lot of this in the dating market. And unfortunately, that is probably the reality for a lot of guys, which does make sense, because there's a lot of guys that aren't dating right now because they don't want to experience such a thing. Now, there is what I said initially, which, like I said, highly unconfirmed, but a lot about the partner that you want to be with is, how you carry yourself and how you end up attracting them. And, maybe, just maybe, the kind of people that he's attracting in terms of how he carries himself kind of gets him into such positions. And, you can say that that's the case. And for a lot of guys that are going through this sort of issue, the problem is who they're attracting, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that could be right to some degree. But I'll be honest, there's a lot of women out here that are entitled enough to think that this is the kind of life that they should aim for, and the right guy, whatever that's supposed to look or sound like, is the guy that will be able to live up to this and be perfectly comfortable. And the interesting part about it is, the flip side, which is what guys usually talk about, is also something similar to this, but on the extreme end, where it's like, oh, you can pay for all of these things, you can fly a babe out, but if she's not into you, then, she'll either cheat on you or it just won't work out. But if a babe is really, really interested in you, if there's high interest from her towards you, then you won't even need to spend a dime, and shorty will still come through for you. She will be willing to give it her everything, and both sides are definitely not going to meet each other in the middle. There's no real midpoint for each of these people. It's just which side manages to do a lot more of the pulling, of which I feel like the entitled babes that want a guy to spend on them may take up a little bit more space in the dating market, but the biggest winners are the women that aren't even about that. Yes, the women that want a guy to spend cash on them might talk about how such women are miserable, they still get cheated on, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's not like they're the biggest winners either. And it's not like their strategy usually tends to work all that well, because, I kid you the hell not, such women will usually, if they manage to bag a dude, will usually end up bagging dudes that, if they're doing pretty well for themselves, will have a pretty good idea of their value in the dating market, especially if there's a lot of women that want a guy like this that will spend on them the way this woman wants. And it'll have some very unintended consequences. And the interesting part about it is, a lot of these women like to assume those consequences and be like, oh no, I can still find a guy that's all into me and blah blah. But I assure you that such guys, it's usually going to be a trade-off of some sort. So normally the trade-off that exists in this entire thing is either A, you are dealing with a guy that is just not going to value you all that much, or isn't going to want anything long term with you, or B, if they want something long term with you, you have to be comfortable with the idea that this guy will probably fuck around quite a bit. And I know that's probably a babe who's gonna be like, oh no, you're just chatting shit, but there's guys that are very loyal to their babes. Well, let's just look at what the current reality looks like, okay? Now, this guy makes pretty good money, is willing to finance your life the way you're talking about it right now, because this is just a date. This is actually just the first date. You barely know fuck all about this dude, and dude is willing to spend this kind of money on you. So you are basically going to be with a guy that does not mind spending money on you. And yes, the guy will probably be interested in you, and he finds you attractive, and he wants to be with you, whether romantically or sexually. Let's take the more short-term route, which I had mentioned earlier on, because dude knows that he can basically use his cash to pull you, and he manages to pull you. If he can do it with you, he can do it with 10, 15, 20 other babes. So you might end up being part of a rotation for him. So if you're okay with that rotation, then well and good, of which I know there's a shit ton of women who they eventually get to a point where they don't want that rotation anymore. They want something that's a little bit more long-term. So let's assume that you bag a long-term dude, and this guy knows that he has that kind of money and he bags you long-term. So first of all, it's either this guy has the kind of money that will do that, and he is extremely busy. So he's extremely busy in that he is putting in the work to pull that kind of bank, and he won't really have all that much time for you. And it might seem like it's not a bad idea. Oh, I can be comfortable with the money, I don't mind crying in a Range Rover. But all of that shit, once it becomes your normal, you realize that you don't really have a partner. You have someone that operates like a machine and does not give a shit about you, and you end up turning into a trophy wife that may not be respected all that much by a lot of people. But let's assume that, that's not the case. And this guy is active and he spends time with you. Well, guess what? This guy knows that the very same things that you want are the same things that a bunch of other babes want as well. And guess what? There's some other babes that will most likely be hotter or just look different, but they'll still look hot. And they will want to be with this guy for a fraction of what it is that he's giving you. So they're willing to take less if they can bag dude. And they're willing to bag the guy by throwing it back as much as possible so that they can bag the dude. So guess what? This guy is gonna go and experience it from one babe, from another babe, and from a babe just like you in a sequence whereby he's going to enjoy himself. Now, if he decides to keep them as short terms and doesn't have any as a long term, then you might be on the plus. But if he's getting a long termer, then now suddenly you'll start wondering if this babe is going to end up taking up your spot, of which, regardless of which of those two situations you end up in, the problem is you have a man that is busy fucking around with other babes. And guess what? Not unless if you're comfortable with that, then you have a problem. So are you comfortable with that? Of which, if you're comfortable with that, then well and good. Go and chase guys that are into the money like that, or are willing to spend money on you like that. And at least you'll know exactly what it is that you're getting. But if you're not feeling it like that, and you're like, what, screw this guy, I don't want a man that cheats on me, and you decide to wait for your Prince Charming that is willing to spend on you the way you want, and is still going to be loyal to you, well, you're gonna give it some time. And then, you will stay off the dating market, because the guys that want to do that don't want to be there long term, and the guys that want to be there long term don't want to do it with just you alone. So you're gonna be like, what, fuck these dudes. I don't want these guys, whether it's Kenyan guys, whether it's men in general, you'll complain about it. But as time goes by, and as you wait for your ideal sort of man, it eventually starts to get to a point where now suddenly it's like, most of your peers are getting married and they're having kids. And it's like, okay, I'm getting older. It's not like you'll be hot forever. And you now want to bag a guy that is financially stable. He doesn't have to spend a shit ton of money on you, but you want a guy that's financially stable. And that might be a little bit hard because, the number of guys that are in the dating market that are older than you, that are willing to give you what it is that you want, is dwindling fast. So you end up finding that good examples of men are very few and far between, and bagging them is harder. And not unless if you're willing to be some married dude's side babe, the chance of you bagging a financially stable guy are dwindling quite fast. And then eventually you find that those babes end up at a point where they want to be with a guy that can handle themselves pretty well financially and maybe accommodate a little bit extra, and they'll be fine with that because they'll have gotten to a point where they're like, but it's not like I'm an expensive babe. I just want a guy that can take care of me, but I'm not a particularly expensive babe. Provided that you can sort out your bills and you can treat me nicely, then that's something that I'm okay with. Which is basically like taking the long route of, I just want a good, decent guy that can spoil me every so often. So essentially, the path that these babes can take where they want a guy to financially be like down for them the way they want is literally riddled with one of two choices, where they can either get into the golden handcuffs and just choose to be with a guy that can fuck around, but we'll probably give them a kid and we'll take care of them financially and everything, or they can become some person's second wife or some shit. Or the other option is they basically wait for Prince Charming, then eventually they will just be looking for a prince, then at some point they'll be okay with being with a good man. And by then, the number of good men that will be around will be particularly small. Either way, I don't see any of those options looking all that great, And if anything, that level of entitlement isn't really giving any positive long-term benefits. So if there's any benefit to be seen, it's mostly on the short term. Which kind of leads me to the conclusion of all of this, which is, we're all adults here, we're all mostly working class, and if anything, guys are already suffering just as badly as women are when it comes to dealing with taxes and shit, and dealing with bills and costs and everything. So wanting to throw a bunch of your bills and everything onto a guy because men are supposed to be providers and shit, and a man should be able to finance your life or whatever belief it is you have, it's not really going to benefit you, because not unless if you want a guy that is very, very financially healthy, but doesn't really respect you all that much, or is willing to treat you as a side piece or as a trophy wife, there's a pretty good chance that it's just not going to work out for you. So probably if some of these women stopped acting like they were babies, then I guess most of these men probably wouldn't be treating them like they are their fathers. Although, then again, maybe I might be wrong about this. Maybe my analogy of everything is completely messed up and I have zero understanding. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG. It is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.